This is a TalkStation original podcast.
On this week's episode of the Paper Boys podcast, we're joined by Big Rock TV MC Tommy Bennett and top dog angler Todd Dickerson. We talk about the 65th annual Big Rock Blue Marlin tournament, putting its sensation controversy behind it, and about the record 914-pound blue marlin Dickerson caught in 2019. It all starts now on the Paper Boys podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Paper Boys podcast. I'm JJ Smith.
And I'm Zack Nally.
And today we are joined by past Big Rock Blue Marlin Tournament president and current board member, Tommy Bennett.
Good afternoon, fellas. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
We're happy to have you. We're putting a bow on Big Rock. It was quite a biggie, the 65th annual. That Saturday night, they come in, sensation, and I told Zack that night, we're getting ready to see a legendary night one way or another, and it went the other way, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, and I want to focus on what it could have been too, sure. JJ. You know, this is the second or third midnight weigh-in we've had. Some have been a little more eventful than others. But to me, standing down there, I mean, I'm right in the middle of the whole thing with a microphone. It's 11 o'clock at night or whatever. There's 10,000 people there. I mean, what a crowd. Just think about what it could have been. You know, here's your major sponsor, hole number one, local boat, one of the more famous names in the sport fishing community. I mean, it just could have been, what's the word, spectacular, off the hook, whatever you want to say. And it didn't. And we came to a great resolution, and we're moving on. You mentioned the 65th annual tournament. We've also just finished the third annual Big Rock Kids tournament, smashing success. The KWLA tournament right before, all just smashing successes this year. So this is my third Big Rock function of the day. We're already working on next year's tournament. So all's good.
Tell us about that Saturday night. I mean, I know you're the person at the center of it all, and you're on the docks. You're out there by yourself, and you got this big crowd in front of you. Was there a moment when you knew that something was amiss or something was going to be different about that night?
Yeah, no, not until the boat got there and we looked in the cockpit, and you could obviously tell. I mean, the people that have seen it were there. They knew that something was amiss. It puts you on the spot really quick. You are expecting this wonderful outcome, and honestly, that's all I had on my mind at the time was, you know, this is going to be great. You could tell the fish was going to be the biggest fish of the tournament. It's a fairy tale. I mean, you couldn't have written the movie any better. And having to regroup there right on the fly was not what I was expecting. I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Yeah. For those listening, you know, sensation comes in and the fish gets hoisted up, and, you know, from the crowd side, we can see the fish, but we can't see what tournament officials can see on the other side of the fish was the two bites that came from a shark or other marine mammal. And it was determined that night that fish, which weighed 621.8?
619.4, I think.
619.4, that it was not going to be valid. It was going to be disqualified per the rules. And, you know, I think it was a fair rule application, and it was a difficult position that everybody was in, and it was one of those things that is unfortunate, but it just happened. And, you know, that night, it was hard not to, like you said, there was this big Hollywood moment that was set up, and it was hard to get away from that and kind of go through the negative side of things. What was it like handling that from your end?
Yeah, nobody wants to deliver bad news.
Right.
You know, thinking about it, reflecting on it right now, what we said was probably the best thing we could have said is, you know, we've got an entry in our tournament that they paid good money to be there, and they have the same right as the other 273 boats in the tournament. And instead of saying just like that, here's the decision, it was, we need to think about this. Supercharged atmosphere. We need to kind of let things die down a little bit. Let's take some time, get the facts, and make a decision out of respect for our customer, the sensation, but also out of respect for the other 273 customers who were the other entries in the tournament. And ultimately, that was the right thing to do. Clearer heads prevail, you know, overnight, a little thought, a little more research, you know, talking to a few more people, assessing everything that happened. And it worked out just like it should have.
Tommy's the emcee, so he's running the show down there all week, you know, alerting the crowd what's happening and when a boat's coming in and, you know, the shout out of the weight. And Sensation, as you mentioned, it's the Jarrett Bay hole number one, an iconic boat. They lash onto this fish just mere minutes before lines come out of the water on the last day. It goes into super death overtime. They fight it for 6 hours. It's almost midnight when they come in. Everything. I mean, you all are probably, you're probably got goose pimples. Everybody with Big Rock.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, this is. There have been three weigh-ins like this in the modern era of the tournament, which means with the video cameras and all that kind of stuff. There were a couple 25 years ago, and it was me and Dale Ward and the captain and the mate and maybe two other people that came to see it, at 3 o'clock in the morning. So this is the modern era of the tournament. The first one was young guys from Charleston or from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And we were just amazed that the town sent the fire truck down, and this was at the Oldway Station on the east end of the waterfront. Right. The fire truck was there. They lit up the whole place. We had no idea what to expect. The guy comes in and wins the tournament with a midnight weigh-in. A couple of years ago, the Widespread comes in. Those two young boys from Raleigh, I remember he had shredded his hand. He was the angler. Another long, protracted fight, single-engine boat. They get to the dock at 11 o'clock. Boom, there's your winner. Third time's the charm. That's what you expect. That's what we had lived through. And it was, you think about what could have been, perhaps. And
even if it's not late at night, there's been other instances where the last day has produced
oh
amazing
my gosh,
stories. You go back to 2019 when Top Dog comes in at like 8 o'clock, 8:30 p.m., with the biggest fish ever.
I'm the emcee at the awards banquet.
Yeah.
Okay. We're into the awards banquet. I'm calling people's names saying, do this and you've won that. And the phone rings. Hold the phone, stop what you're doing. We all sat down in the Civic. There were 800 people there. We stopped what we were doing and we all sat down and we watched the weigh-in on Big Rock TV while we're in the middle of the awards banquet. So we had to adapt on the fly again. And you'll notice that after that, the awards party is now on Sunday morning.
That's smart. That's smart. So that's a funny story. You mentioned that phone call. I was at the award ceremony that night as well. And I don't know if I asked you or someone else, but I noticed you got a phone call and there was some excitement. There was some talk. There was some fervor. And I asked somebody what's going on. And they said, we've just gotten word that Top Dog is bringing in a monster.
Yeah.
Someone's gotten a view of it from somewhere, and I booked it into my car with about 30 or 40 other people, and we raced downtown to find a parking spot and get to the landing just in time, and that was an incredible night as well. And back later in this episode, we're gonna chat with Top Dog Captain Todd Dickerson about his fish in 2019 and some of the comparisons that's been made between the fish that was hoisted up that night and the fish that Sensation brought in. And there was some commentary that night. They had difficulty getting their fish in the boat, and it came in with some marks on it, with some shredding, and it was difficult to understand for people online when Sensation happened about why this wasn't the same situation. And that's fair if you don't know exactly what happened that night.
It is. You looked at that fish at the time. I never saw it, to be honest with you, but the pictures I saw, it looked pretty gruesome. But the rules, the IGFA rules are pretty clear. Anything that happens during the fight is one thing, but once the fish is landed, the game is over. Todd will tell you all about it. They were talking about cutting another hole in the back of the boat. It's just a great story, and he does such a great job telling it. But yeah, it's a completely different situation, and I think maybe the Big Rock has been a victim of our own success. We've really tried to reach out to the community and try to establish fans and supporters, because when they're supporters and fans, they buy our T-shirts, they buy our hats, and all of that is part of the money that we raise that goes back to our charitable contributions. You mentioned we've given away $1 million
each of the last 2
years. And a lot of that comes from our fans. I don't know of any other way to say it. They're enthralled with the tournament. They're excited about the tournament. And they buy T-shirts, they buy our hats, and the profits are given right back to charity every year. So that's kind of the way it happens. You kind of build up this following, and they're fans of the tournament, but they're not fishermen. And there's a difference. The guys that fish in the tournament kind of understand. It's just a little different mindset about the tournament.
As sports reporters, we definitely can relate to that. I mean, there are times when people in the bleachers of football games, basketball games may not quite understand the rules to the same level and will argue, and that's part of sports. And
great analogy. Great analogy.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes.
That's true.
The bite marks. Tommy, do you recall the moment you saw them and what went through your head and your stomach, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where are the rules? That's the first thing that went through my mind.
Straight to the book.
I got to see the rule, and I remember I was probably a little too aggressive with some of the staff. Get me a copy of the rules. We need a copy of the rules, and then of course, my God, the rules are now 5 pages long. Which rule is it? Show me. I can't find it. You know, it's dark. Show me the rule. We all got flashlights out trying to light up the little rule book, and it's where is it? Let me see it. Because we got to make an announcement.
I think a theory a lot of us had was, well, they would have disqualified it that night, but they decided to de-escalate the situation. You never would have called it that night, would you have?
I don't think so.
You would have wanted to do
I don't think so.
due diligence.
Again, just being respectful to the guy that's caught this fish. But don't forget those other boats that are out there, because they're equally as important. They signed up under the same set of rules too. So, yeah, we handled it the right way, and it worked out the way it should.
Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk more with Tommy.
This episode is brought to you by RE/MAX Ocean Properties of Morehead City. Picture yourself waking up to breathtaking sunrises, strolling along the pristine sandy beaches of the Crystal Coast, and indulging in the tranquility of seaside living. That's what Realtor Jimmy Paler can help you find. Take advantage of his years of experience and dedication, and let him guide you through every step of the home buying process, ensuring you find the perfect property that suits your style. A home is more than a place you go after work. It's where you invest in your well-being, where memories are made and cherished for a lifetime. Don't wait. Start your home buying journey today. Let Jimmy Paler and RE/MAX Ocean Properties make it happen for you. Come visit their office at 3326 Bridges Street in Morehead City, or give Jimmy a call at 252-342-0802. That's RE/MAX Ocean Properties at 342-0802.
Tommy, the one boat we didn't mention and didn't get mentioned as much as it should have during the tournament, I feel like they were the winner that night, but also somehow the loser was Sushi, who ends up winning it, but none of the talk is about them.
Yeah, and JJ, you're absolutely right. Our champion, it was the Sushi this year, but the one big difference is that he's going to have that boat name engraved in granite on the Big Rock Fountain. So he's going to get his for many, many years to come. Charlie's a great guy. I actually met him the first time the night of the Lady Angler Tournament. And he came up. He's a very personable, outgoing guy, fascinating individual. I mean, he owns lots of businesses, has a fascinating background. I'm pretty sure is a National Transportation Safety Board crash investigator. I think I got all that right. Fascinating individual and very personable. Great fella. Has won a lot of tournaments, and he said, this is the last one that I wanted to win, and now he's done it. So congratulations to him.
Well, yeah,
Great
he's
job.
won White Marlin Open in 2021, and now this one in 2023. He's having a great stretch.
His accountant loves him. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
If you want to charter a boat and go catch some fish, maybe get up with Charlie. I think
Sure.
Well, and it's you mentioned the story of the number one haul sensation coming in that night, and what a big story. But Sushi's also a boat that's near and dear to the Big Rock heart. I mean, they've been fishing this for a while, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think Big Rock did a story when Sushi won White Marlin Open, and so it's definitely still a boat that the tournament is familiar with, and I'm sure you all are happy to see that boat have success.
Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks to our relationship with our entrants, our customers, is what we think of them as. And we want to give the very best customer service to those guys that enter the tournament, guys and gals who enter the tournament. And we have such a huge following on social media. For us to point out one of our guys that's been successful somewhere else, it helps promote our tournament. It helps promote the other tournaments in the area, for example. Rocky Hardison recently won one of those Bermuda tournaments. Yeah. And, I went to kindergarten with Rocky. I've known Rocky all of my life. For us to be able to put on our website and our social media messages, congratulations, Captain Rocky Hardison, I think that's one of the things that really sets the Big Rock apart. We talked about it, the charitable part of the tournament. It's just been a phenomenal success. And a lot of other tournaments are not like that. They're not centered on charity. Some of the tournaments here in our area are the Ducks Unlimited tournament this weekend, for example, the Swansboro Rotary tournament. All those are fundraising type tournaments. Some of the other big ones, maybe not so much, but I think that's one of the things that sets the Big Rock apart. And then just the way we treat our customers, our entrants. They're part of our family. We are in touch with them throughout the year. We send them gifts, Christmas gifts, from time to time, things of that nature. And I think they really appreciate it.
Well,
I think
they've
really
certainly returned the favor by increasing the boat count every year. I mean,
absolutely.
You look at the last 10 years. 2013, the purse was $1.15 million. This year it was 5.84, and that was a touch less than last year, 5.85. But we still had more boats this year.
Correct.
271 boats. Is there room for growth beyond this point?
The answer to that is yes. As our community grows, more boat slips are created, and I really think that's probably one of the biggest holdbacks we have. Challenge. It's not a problem. It's a challenge. Finding a place to dock a 65-foot boat, it's an issue. And we've got more and more and more boat slips, but the rules say you got to fish out of Beaufort Inlet for the most part. There's a box you have to fish in. You can fish out of various inlets, but it's kind of headquartered around Beaufort Inlet. Obviously, we've got boats in Hatteras that fish out of Hatteras Inlet, maybe some even out of Ocracoke from time to time. But it is a Morehead City, Carteret County-based tournament, and there's only so many spots to have boats, and I think that's probably one of the limiting factors. Otherwise, who knows how many we could have.
Yeah, you talk about people fishing out of different locations. I heard during KWLA, which is another tough one in terms of boats, finding enough boats, enough spaces. There have been boats coming up from Oak Island. So there's certainly the ability to fish out of other places and come here.
Yeah, think about the guys that are Florida-based or New Jersey-based, some of the guys that travel around the world. They have to have a place to put that 75-foot boat. And you mentioned the growth of the tournament. 20 years ago, there were 2 60-footers in the tournament, or something like that. The boats have gotten bigger too, and they naturally just take up more space. And that's a problem or a challenge in the whole marine industry is all these boats are getting bigger, right up to the mega yachts. Marinas that were built 30 years ago did not anticipate needing 10 slips for 175-foot yachts. Now they have to have them.
I know one way the tournament has tried to combat that is to create more opportunities for outboards. And that's certainly grown tremendously in the past few years.
Well, look at what's happening in the outboard in that segment of the boating industry. It's nothing now to see a 42-foot outboard with 4 motors on it. That was a good-sized boat in 1985, a 40-footer. Now that's a subcompact.
Just to give a little insight on the growth of the tournament, Tommy, you were talking about the South Carolina boat that came in. That was 2007. I remember that. That was my first Big Rock.
Okay.
And that was Montuki Lewis.
That's right. That's right.
His
what was the name of the boat?
His dad was Tommy Lewis.
What was the name of the boat?
Back bar.
Back bar. Yep.
And they fought that blue for 6 hours. Mm-hmm. They came in on a Friday night. It was about 11 o'clock, about the same time, different day. I remember Craig Ramey, shout out, former News Times sports reporter, took a great photo. What made it so great was the lights underneath the boat, all these different color lights, and that was just super exciting. And the difference in this year is we had in our paper that was about 2,000 people down there that night. Now we got 10,000 people, and they ended up winning $800,000. Sensation would have won $3.5 million.
The tournament has just grown beyond what any of us ever thought it would do. One of my fellow board members tells a story right before I got on the board, 3 or 4 years before I got on the board. We didn't have enough money to pay for the T-shirts. That's not a problem today. The tournament has it's grown beyond anybody's wildest dreams. Those of us that have been around there for a while, we take a lot of pride in that. It would be like you raising your children or you starting a business and helping it flourish and watching it get to the point where it's very successful. I think a lot of us have that same mindset about the tournament. It's something that we've spent a lot of time on. We talk about new things. We're very innovative, very creative. We don't mind trying something and see if it'll work. And a lot of the things that we've tried have worked and have led to the ultimate success of the tournament. But it's we've had great leadership, great participation from the board members. We think out of the box sometimes. We have great brainstorming sessions. You can't imagine some of the crazy things that we've talked about. The video stuff this year that's finally come to fruition. We talked about that 20 years ago, hiring a satellite company to broadcast via satellite action from the boats. And it's a challenge when you have a tournament like this. We're accustomed to watching a football game or a basketball game. You see it as it happens. Now we just get the end result of all the day's hard work. We only see the very end of it. Being able to communicate with the boats by video and maybe watch them catch a fish is coming. I mean, it's coming. We had the offshore interviews this year, and that's a step. But that technology is going to get better and better and more efficient, and we're positioned to take advantage of it.
Yeah, just to describe some of the technological advances that have been made. I mean, more than a decade ago, you all bring up Big Rock TV.
15 years ago.
15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a long time ago, and you're broadcasting what's happening at the weigh station across the country, internationally. But today, or this year, it's grown to extraordinary lengths. You've got drones flying around, catching what people are doing on the boats, capturing that. You've got Starlink antennas on multiple boats so that they can broadcast what's happening live in the fight, and everything is being broadcast through Big Rock TV online, and it's such a chance to see what's happening offshore. You mentioned the ability to see things offshore versus just seeing the final product. A lot of what happens offshore is the main bulk of sport fishing. I mean, it's still very exciting for JJ and I, who have seen it year after year, for people on the docks to see the fish get hoisted up. But what's happening offshore is really where the excitement is, and the chance to see that happen, whether it's live or whether it's recorded and broadcast later, I think is a chance of growth that is really exciting.
Oh, yeah. And we're embracing it. Trust me, we are all in, and we're working very hard to figure it all out. There are other people who are working on it as well, and we hope that we could have a relationship with them and make it bigger and better. It would just serve everybody so much better. Certainly the Big Rock, for sure.
You couldn't have imagined what it was going to be 20 years ago to what it is now. What do you think 20 years from now looks like?
I can't tell you because it might be a trade secret. I think I know what it's going to look like, and it's going to look like, let's just say, think Bassmasters Classic, an inside stadium with 50,000 people watching the weigh-in live.
Jeez.
Where are we going to do that in Morehead City? We're going to figure it out.
And we call it the Super Bowl of Carteret County for a reason. Tommy, thank you so much for joining us today and helping us put a wrap on Big Rock, and it's definitely one we'll remember.
You got it. Thanks for all you do. My great pleasure.
In 1959, you could buy a new house on the coast for about $12,000, a new car for $2,000, and fill it up with gas for only 25 cents a gallon. Everyone was cruising the beach, listening to the Platters, the Coasters, and a young guy named Elvis. And when it was time to eat, they all ended up at L's Drive-In in Morehead City. For over 60 years, L's has been serving up our world-famous super burgers, shrimp burgers, oyster burgers, and our mouth-watering fried chicken and barbecue. This coastal tradition of great food and friendly and fun customer service means L's is proud to be serving our third generation of regulars. And we're not done yet. Drive in and pick your spot under the old oak trees, next to the hospital in Morehead City. Then prepare your taste buds for a coastal tradition like no other, providing the best food, service, and atmosphere in Morehead City since 1959. L's Drive-In, next to the hospital in Morehead City.
We're joined now by Todd Dickerson. He's co-owner of the Top Dog, which was now a legendary boat in Big Rock history. In 2019, they set the record with a 914-pounder. That was also a dramatic deal, much like this past Big Rock, where they weighed in a Saturday evening, last day of the tournament at about 8:30 that night. And Todd, when you think back on that night, what's the first thing that pops in your mind?
The emotions that went from one end to the other. We laughed, we cried. The endorphin dump was incredible. It was something special, and I know those guys, from the Sensation felt the same way.
And I definitely want to hear more about that story about catching that fish, because I know you were the guy in the chair, and I think there was only 4 or 5 of you in the boat. But I do want to get a sense of Saturday night last month when Sensation brought their fish in. Were you watching on the broadcast that night?
So it's funny, I was actually driving home up 95 back to the D.C. area, and I was watching it on my iPad the entire time.
Oh, wow.
And, was cheering for him. I say this every year, and you can You can, I'm sure, find it on an interview or something. I hope every year that they break the record, and I was actually hoping that they were breaking the record. So yeah, I mean, I was cheering for those guys probably louder than anybody because I was by myself driving up the road.
At what point did you know, I'm sure you were following the controversy and you know, when they announced, I think Tommy Bennett was on the microphone and said, all right, we got to talk about the rules, folks, because if you're watching on the iPad, you saw what we saw on the dock, which was just a big fish hoisted up. We didn't see until they turned it around that there were bite marks on the fish. What was your reaction when you saw that?
So I got to be honest, when you've experienced that situation, meaning backing into there and it's out of control, and right away I saw some things that I kind of was like, man, that's different. Like, and I hadn't even seen the fish per se. I just saw people reacting in a way that they didn't react when we had pulled into the scales. So it kind of put a little asterisk, up, I would say. And then the live feed went dead, obviously, I guess from a power outage or whatever, I had heard. So I switched over to social media and followed it on Jared Bay's page. I don't know how to describe it besides after our fish and feeling all those emotions, to have to deal with something in that realm would just, I don't know how you handle that, to be honest with you. I don't know if you would get angry, obviously upset, or how you would handle that.
Yeah, there's definitely a moment when Greg McCoy was sitting in the captain's chair and you could kind of see the dejected look of that this might not go the way they were hoping it would go. From your end, I'm curious, was there a moment when you saw that the conversation had started to include your fish from 2019?
Yeah, so look, I'm a Maryland guy. I love North Carolina, and when we're down for the Big Rock and Hatteras and all that, like, I support those tournaments just as much as the next guy, and always willing to, like we're doing right now, any interviews, any whatever you need to promote those tournaments. They're great events, and there is not a better group of tournament organizers than the ladies at the Big Rock. I mean, any want or need, you just ask and it's there. So when I started hearing the rumblings of Top Dog's fish, top dog, I mean, I'll be honest, it's not even remotely the same situation. The one comment that really bothered me that I heard on, I think it was, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, but I believe it was the Meat Eater podcast that somebody sent me, was our fish didn't hang on its own weight, which is totally false. The scale at the Big Rock at the time was not tall enough to hang our fish straight up and down. So they tied the bill to the tail, so it was assumed that that's why the fish stayed together. That wasn't the case at all. I can assure you that fish would have hung on its own if the scale was tall enough to let it hang. As a matter of fact, Randy Ramsey tells the story of how the scale was rebuilt after our fish. So, we left our mark in not only the water fountain with the plaque, but we got a new scale built. It looks like we've started a new tradition of Saturday fish coming in late. And, now with the, Starlink and all that, like, you're never going to hear the stories that came over the radio like with our fish, because everybody now is instant and can go right live like we did in Hatteras this year. And, the dock talk is never going to be the same like it used to be.
Yeah, that night it was noticed that the Sensations catch had some bite marks on it, and there's a IGFA rule that says if catch has shark or other mammal bites, that it's disqualified because it hinders the fish's ability to fight. And then in the days to come, whether it was Sensation or it was people on social media, they started to bring up Top Dog, and that fish looked like it was mutilated and looked like it was bitten. And when at the time you brought it in, or in the years to follow, I don't think I'd ever heard anything like that. And of course, your fish is legendary for the fact that you fought it for over 5 hours. Then it took you all over an hour to get it in the boat, and it was getting it in the boat and bringing it in that caused the mutilation to your fish, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So we have a tuna door on our boat. I mean, our boat is a custom Carolina built right in Wanchese. And, those tuna chartermen, they don't care about the billfish, and I say that kind of jokingly, meaning, as long as the door can get a giant tuna in, that's all they really Well, there's not many, I'll just say 1,000-pound tuna running around, So the door was not built for and I will call it a grander blue marlin, even though it's not 1,000 pounds. I'm just using that as a term. So, we knew the fish. We tried every possible scenario to the point of where if we would have had a sawzall on that boat, I assure you, I would have cut the back of the boat off by myself as the owner of the boat and would have explained it to my brother at a later time. We had no other options than what we did. We had myself and 2 mates on the boat and Ryan, the captain, and literally I was shot after the 5.5-hour fight. I was using ratchet straps, which was about as much as I could do after fighting that fish. And everybody else, 3 guys couldn't pick that fish up and bring it over the top. So we came through the door. We literally tried everything down the Dawn dish soap to try to get it through the door.
Yeah, I remember there was talk offshore about, could you get help from other boats, and that was out of the rules. So it was that you were left with limited options. How did you end up getting it back into the way station?
So it's funny. You're exactly right. We talked to Randy over the radio, and we're verified. People could bring us stuff, and throw it to us, like come along. But by this time, once we finally realized it's too late for somebody to come back out and bring us a come along, we just kind of made do and used some ratchet straps that we had for our fuel tank that we take to Dominican Republic that were in the, down in the engine room, and just kind of figured it out. We took the tail and tied it up to the belly band of the fly bridge, and right where the tuna door sits is our exhaust. And literally just backing in, we had video that we literally just sent to the Big Rock committee prior to, showing the exhaust just, blowing hot water and, air right on the area of concern. And that was all shown the night of the thing. I think we turned over, I don't want to say a number, but multiple media cards off. I think we had 4 or 6 GoPros going throughout that entire fight. And we passed 4 lie detector tests, numerous different questions, and there was never a doubt that was a mutilated shark bit fish.
And the water and the fuel, then the exhaust was the main culprit, right, Todd?
That's exactly correct. Yep, it just wore that skin out right there where the exhaust was hitting it.
When you got back to the docks, were you worried that it was mutilated, and would that raise questions or anything?
There was not a question in my mind that the fish was whole, and we had video evidence to prove all that, and actually some very good shots of it just paddling right next to the boat when we had it right up next to the boat. So there was zero question in our mind that it was mutilated fish.
I think one of the important things too was that y'all were in constant communication with Randy or with over the radio with tournament officials about what your situation was, how it was going, and what kind of situation you were in, so that when you did get there, it wasn't a surprise to them, or everybody knew what was happening when you backed in.
Yeah, I think in any type of thing, every day, the more you can communicate, the better. And I think we over-communicated to a fault at some of those radio transmissions. But, we had nothing to hide. We were transparent. Not to dwell on something, but going back to Hatteras, we had one Hatteras, I guess that was 2 weeks before the Big Rock. And we had to DQ a fish that we were going to win the release division on because we crossed the covering board with a gaff because it was so rough. And, we would have won biggest fish and the release category at Hatteras 2 weeks prior. So, unfortunately it happens. I'm not saying those guys saw the bite prior to, I'm sure while they looked at that fish a bazillion times on the ride in, they weren't even thinking about that. It was heartbreaking to any team that's competed in this tournament. It's terrible.
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back and talk more with Todd.
It's It's the Solid Rock Carriers Summer Thunder, presented by DPD Concrete, this Saturday, July 22nd at Carteret County Speedway. The Grand National Super Series stars and cars make their first stop of the 2023 season this Saturday. Tickets just $15. Kids 10 and under free. Plus military discount to active and retired military with proper ID. VIP seats, trackside spots, camping and Moonshiners Restaurant, all at Carteret County Speedway. The Grand National Super Series this Saturday. Green flag drops at 6. Get your tickets at CarteretSpeedway.com.
Hi there, this is Brian Hanks with the Brian Hanks Show from Kinston, North Carolina. You are listening to the Paper Boys Podcast with JJ and Zack.
We're back talking with Todd Dickerson, co-owner of the Top Dog, the biggest fish ever brought into the 65 years of the Big Rock Blue Marlin tournament, and that night was a special one. Zack was kind of first-hand knowledge of that night.
There's so few moments that you get to be part of a really exciting sports moment in this county and on a grand scale. And I remember that night, there was a lot of fish that had come in that week, and we're at the Civic Center waiting for the award ceremony to start. And I look over at Tommy Bennett, who we just had on this episode, and he's on the phone with somebody, and there was some excitement. People started kind of rushing out to the parking lot, and I went and asked him. I said, what's going on? And there was word that had come in that, you were close. You were about 30, 45 minutes out, and that whatever was coming in on your boat was a monster. Not just a big fish, but a very, very, very big fish. And so I get in my car, and a couple dozen of us, within the speed limit, race down to downtown. It's about, 5 miles down to the downtown docks, and you're trying to find a place to park. People are already there, and you're squeezing through the crowd to get to the area where the media is, and then sure enough, a few minutes later, you come back in with what can only be described as a monster, a very large fish. And I just think back to that night and the emotions around it. You described it, just a monumentous moment for the sport, for the competition. And JJ, you asked a question before we came back here. How did tournament know that there was a big fish coming in? Do you know anything about that?
So I do know about that. And first of all, you're not going to, your term of limitations on your speeding to the docks, I'm sure, is over by now. So what happened was we were trying to get the fish, obviously, out of the water as much as we possibly could while we were running, to the point of we were varying our speed to try to get the prop wash off the fish, if that makes sense. So what happened was we called in, and I'm sure you can pull the radio transmissions because it's kind of cool to listen to, and Randy said, I'm sending Towboat US or whatever the service is down there that you guys have. And he came running out because it was a beautiful flat day, unlike this year, but he came running out in his center console and got behind us, and we realized that 19 knots was a perfect speed to keep the fish least exposed to the prop wash. So when we got to approximately the no wake zone, we're like, hey man, thanks for helping us, getting the speed dialed in to preserve the fish. And then he took off. So I'm pretty certain that he had given the you boys better get ready when they get here, because this thing's, as we called it, the dinosaur. Then we got to the no wake zone, and Ryan looked down at me and was like, hey, we're in the no wake zone. I said, I think we can just keep running it, 19 knots with what we got going on. I doubt if anybody's going to bother us. So, we did 19 knots right to, I think it's Jack's right there on the water, and shut her down and, spun her into the scales.
One of our favorite moments as media people down there is when you hoist the fish, you kind of throw out your guesses about what it might be, and you hear the gasp from the crowd. There could be no doubt when they started to pull that fish out of the boat that this was something on a totally different level. And I think we've had a couple of 700-pounders come in, but nothing to this level. And, you had to have already been celebrating on your way in, I'm sure, that year.
Oh, there was no question we had the winner. As far as weight-wise, I don't recall, but I think Rocky, on the Wolverine, Rocky and Chase's fish was close to 500, I think. No, actually, I think they were just over 500 because I believe they won the Fabulous Fisherman.
That's right.
I'm a little foggy there, but I don't remember the exact weight, but they had to be over 500. When we tied that tail going back into the cockpit, our beam 18.6, and I mean it took up 3/4 of the beam of the boat. So I mean, when you kill a fish like that, you know you got a winner.
No doubt.
You're not sitting there going, I hope it's a 21-pound dolphin, and not 17. Yeah, there was no question that when we had the one, we just had to get her in and get it on the scale.
Was there a sense that you could possibly have, I know Howard Bass and I caught that 1,000-pounder many years ago, but that wasn't in competition, and I think it was just after the competition had ended. But did you have any sense that you were going to come in with the fish that was the largest fish ever caught in competition off our waters here?
No, honestly, you really don't think of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
You're like, hey, if it's 539, I want a 550. You're not sitting there going, I want a 900-pounder or a 1,000-pounder. I mean, everybody wants to catch one of those, of course. But I mean, let's be real. I know a lot of people that haven't even caught a 500-pounder. We picked the right straw and we got lucky. I mean, we ended up, finding the right bite, and it was the right bite.
Howard Bass Night caught a 1,002-pounder back in 1989. And just to go back to what you were talking about, Todd, Rocky's fish that you all were looking to surpass that year was 588.9 pounds.
Okay, 588, yeah.
Yep. And you all
and talk about class, if I can, for just a minute. I mean, Rocky and Chase and the whole Wolverine team, I mean, they were the first ones to greet us at the dock, at the scale. I can't even express how impressed I was with those guys. I mean, nobody wants to come in second, but I mean, we're friends with those guys. We fish with them in Ocean City during the tournaments down in Dominican Republic, and I mean, they couldn't be happier for us. It was truly a cool experience.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that 2 years ago, Rocky and the Wolverine team catch a 958-pounder with the Mid-Atlantic Fishing Tournament, and I think I remember him saying you were one of the first people at the dock there to greet him and congratulate him, and of course he gave you a little bit of ribbon there for catching that bigger fish.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about, man. Right. And, sit around and have a couple of beers and make fun of each other.
How has life changed for you since winning that tournament that year, Todd?
How has life changed? Oh, boy. I don't know if you have enough time in this segment. We might need a special segment for that. It's been pretty cool. I mean, like I said, the North Carolina people, welcome us a little better now. I think winning the Governor's Cup down there, or what used to be called the Governor's Cup, and, showing that, hey, we're not just showing up once and not going to support this thing anymore. I mean, my guys know every year we're going to the Big Rock. I mean, that's just the only time we didn't do it was, I think, 2 years ago, because fuel prices were like $8.50 a gallon, and I was like, we're not leaving Ocean City, because we had kept the boat in Ocean City to get some work done, and I was like, I'm not just going to throw $35,000 in fuel away. But I can assure you, we're going to be at the Big Rock for as long as I can do the Big Rock.
Well, and you fish a lot of tournaments, and I know where you're from there in Maryland. You've got another pretty big tournament in your neighborhood, but I know there's something special about Big Rock. And can you just briefly tell me what it is that makes Big Rock different from the rest, or what you like about it so much?
I'll make it plain and simple, and this will probably cause some waves here in my hometown, but it's not a $108,000 5-gallon bucket tournament. It's a family setting. There's kids running around. I mean, obviously the Big Rock kids this past week was pretty cool with record-setting numbers. They feed you every night. They, do happy hour. I mean, it's all about, the camaraderie. We don't get that everywhere, I promise you. I mean, like I said, you mentioned one of the tournament that goes on up here. Well, yeah, it's the biggest dollars and all that. I got plenty of size small T-shirts and 5-gallon buckets. I don't need any more of that, or beer koozies. And the other I think the coolest part of the Big Rock is, the foundation giving back. I mean, everywhere you drive around down there, donated by the Big Rock Foundation. Whether it's the baseball field or the museum that they just opened up down there, which we donated our fish to. Just the whole thing. It's just done the right way. You feel special giving back to people that need it.
You talk about giving back, and I know it was something fun that the History Place here in Morehead City was building an exhibit for the Big Rock this year, and they actually went down to your work and grabbed one of the mounts you have of the blue marlin you caught in 2019, and they were very grateful that you were able to donate that to them, at least for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was sitting in on a sea container at our storage yard and just sitting out in the elements. And, when you get that thing made, you're like, man, this is going to be great. I'm putting it in my basement. Well, unfortunately, I needed a basement that was 3 times the size so you could at least walk around it. It sat on that sea container. So when they called, I was like, hey, I'll be more than happy to donate it and would love to give it to that type of thing where some kid, on a summer vacation with grandma can look at that thing and say, is that fish real? And, the story lives on, right?
Absolutely. And Todd, we thank you for joining us to go over that story and the special night that was. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I'm always happy to help.
Could you spare one of those delicious L's fries?
You're a seagull.
Yeah, I know.
You're a talking seagull.
Well, I figured I better speak up because, the food here at L's Drive-In is so great that most folks find it hard to part with. Have you tasted their shrimp burger or their oyster burger? Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I'm having an L Super Burger with all the fixings, some fries, and a cherry Pepsi. All their food here is fantastical.
I know. That's why I keep coming back to L's Drive-In. But it seems no one wants to share even a little bite with a poor, hungry seagull.
I guess I could spare a fry or two.
Thanks. Hey, guys, this lovely young lady is giving us some of her delicious L's Drive-In food.
Hey, wait a sec.
These are my friends, Katie Seagal.
Watch the hood there.
This is Steven Seagal and George Seagal.
Okay, here's another fry.
Oh, by the way, my name is Jonathan Livingston.
Really?
L's Drive-In, nestled in the old oak trees next to the hospital on Arundel Street in Morehead City. Remember, feed the seagulls at your own risk.
It's the Solid Rock Carriers Summer Thunder, presented by DPD Concrete, this Saturday, July 22nd at Carteret County Speedway. The Grand National Super Series stars and cars make their first stop of the 2023 season this Saturday. Tickets just $15. Kids 10 and under free. Plus military discount to active and retired military with proper ID. VIP seats, trackside spots, camping and Moonshiners Restaurant, all at Carteret County Speedway. The Grand National Super Series this Saturday. Green flag drops at 6. Get your tickets at CarteretSpeedway.com.